Well, hello, Beezone watchers and listeners. This is Ed Reither, founder of Beezone, and in the studio today I have a local journalist, Crystal Starr, who is interested in the Beezone from some of my work with her. So, good afternoon, Crystal.
Good afternoon, Ed. How are you?
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
And Crystal and I have been doing some work together, and she has found Beezone to be of interest to her. So I thought it would be good if we could just sit down and use this as an introduction to people who are not familiar with the Beezone. So, Crystal, I believe you've got some questions you want to ask?
I do. I do
Okay.
have some questions. Just to kick things off, what inspired you or convinced you to create such a complex website based on Eastern tradition and philosophy?
Well, it goes back a ways, right? Because I am a student of Eastern teachers that go back to 1968, 69. I also am a teacher, and so I was interested not only in what I learned from the various teachers, and they start with people like Allan Watts and early 1970s writers, Aldous Huxley and Humphreys and the Buddhist Society in London. So I was always a student of this Eastern philosophy, and also an experimenter with some of the early substances that were around in the 1960s and the 70s, which was common in the culture. And so at around 1973, I ran into and was with Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. So this whole interest in meditation, yoga, philosophy, psychology, and even sociology and larger questions were always my study. And so when I then started to write and be a teacher in some of these the aspects of this practice, if you will, there was this new thing called the World Wide Web. And I got into it very early in the Well with Stuart Brand and Sausalito, and learned about making web pages, and I thought it would be a good way just to express my homework and my study and put it out on the World Wide Web. So in 1998, I finally had enough together to create a web page, and it was only a small beginning, and that's how it all started with the World Wide Web, the Beezone.
So you say you were a teacher. Were you a teacher of Eastern tradition and philosophy? Or I kind of know that you taught the youth as well.
Yes.
And then was that in a traditional setting, school setting, or was that in an alternative school setting?
Well, it started with, so my teaching is of an educational high school teacher, but a special education teacher, but a teacher of emotionally disturbed, learning handicapped, learning disabled, behaviorally disordered, as they called it in those days, because the American Disabilities Act didn't start until 1975, and back before then they were just throwing all these mostly boys, and where I came from in New Orleans, black boys, in a classroom, and then that would explode, and then they kicked them out and put them into mental health or juvenile justice systems, and then they kicked them out of their homes and put them in residential treatment centers, and that's where I started, in a residential treatment center outside of New Orleans, and fortunately was able to work with Nicholas J. Long and some of the people from the American University in Washington to start a school, physically and educationally start a school. So that's the beginning of it. But at the same time, I was a student and a teacher setting up Dharma study groups, which was part of the organization of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche in New Orleans, before they were formed into what's called Dharma Dachus, larger groups. But the beginning, back in this is way back, this is 1970, 4, 5. That was when Naropa started, Naropa University.
Hmm.
So I was a meditation, if you will, teacher, starting groups in New Orleans. So I had a home in Covington, Louisiana, outside of New Orleans, and it was on 17 acres, and it was set up to bring people from New Orleans to come to my house every weekend, and we do all-day sittings and have Dharma talks, and so I've always been involved with teaching the Dharma, and then later on I got involved with Adi Da, and then taught in his school. So I taught the children within Adi Da's school in San Rafael, California, for a number of years. And, you know, also I was a drug and alcohol counselor for 25 years in San Francisco.
Wow.
So I've always been an educator of some sort.
And it seems like you've always been able to apply Eastern traditions and teachings to whatever work that you do, and teach and what you were teaching or who you were teaching.
Right, because Eastern philosophy or even psychology it doesn't have a label. You don't have to sell anything, because what it is, it's a personal discipline that you apply to your own personal understanding and growth. And then just by the fact that that gets integrated into my body and mind and sensibilities, that when I then go into a situation, I'm informed by that, how I communicate, how I connect with people, and my understanding of the larger complex situation that we sit in the midst of whatever it is that we're discussing.
Right.
So whether you're an auto mechanic or a psychologist or a doctor, you're applying these meditative, yoga, world understandings to personal relationships. So it really doesn't matter that.
That's really interesting that you say that, because when I first started working with you and I started reading, different articles and whatnot on the website, it all made perfect sense. And I think that viewers and people who, and followers of Beezone will find that a lot of the content on the website are things that are going to immediately click because of what you just said. We're already doing it. Beezone kind of just validates it, organizes it. I think it puts it into compartments so that it's easier digestible than, in society, it's so easy to get away from what naturally feels good.
Right.
And that's something that I really appreciate about the website and working with you, is that it was already naturally in me, and then now this just, being on Beezone.com, it validates it. And I think that makes it a lot easier. Right. In that way.
And that's really what it is. It's whatever the discipline anybody's involved, we're all interconnected. So we may look differently, we may act differently, we may speak different languages, but the heart and the communication, which is primary, the feeling communication, is what is universal. So the Beezone or any other, and I don't like the word religion, because it has such a kind of loaded connotation today. But it does, religion points to these kinds of universal principles that are operative in the world, that are universally connecting all of us. And that's why it should never be a barrier. No matter what hat, color, shirt, skin, book, religion, whatever. These are just external kinds of costumes that are culturally and genetically, environmentally, where we are.
Yeah.
But the blood in you and the blood in me is red.
And it serves the same purpose in our bodies.
So.
Yeah.